These protests in our schools is not going to stop until ICE gets the answers to the questions that everyone wants. You see, every time that people hear say something about ICE killing an immigrant, that means people want to go out and protest. This happened in Flower Bluff on Thursday, so let's take a look at this one.
In Flower Bluff, a walkout. Over in Flower Bluff, a walkout took place today at Flower Bluff High School in protest of immigration enforcement operations across the country. Protests like this one have been taking place at various schools over the past few weeks. Flower Bluff ISD put out a statement on Facebook saying that their mission is to provide a safe and supportive learning environment for every student.
And these walkouts continue despite the state fund warning.
Take the next step in treating your moderate to severe ulcerative colitis with Entyvio.
Take a look at this story.
More and more students walking out of the classroom in protest of ICE. Some of these students from Austin College Prep posted up along the I-35 access road near Capitol Plaza.
I came here today to come here and support my fellow classmates in this wonderful protest that we're here to support our Latino community.
Many school districts have urged students to stay in the classroom. KIPP Texas Public Schools says this was not a school-sanctioned event.
They don't have to do nothing with this. This is mostly all parents and students.
This parent out with his high schooler. He says he supports his kid's decision.
I think the young children today have, I believe, more passion than I had when I was a child.
But some believe there's a better time for students to share their thoughts.
Schools are for an education. If you want to do something before or after school, go do it. You know, if your parents think that's okay, or and if you're going to be safe.
And in a time when schools are struggling with funding, each absence can have an impact.
If kids are skipping class, going out protesting, those schools are not going to be paid for that day for those students who are skipping class.
Texas public school funding is primarily based on average daily attendance, meaning the district receives funds based on the number of students present each day during a certain time frame. It's still unclear how much money districts have lost. On X, though, Governor Abbott saying, "We are also looking into stripping the funding of schools that abandon their duty to teach our kids the curriculum required by law." I reached out to the governor asking if he could clarify and if the legislature would need to act to cut more funding. We didn't receive a clear answer, but in a news conference, he did say this in reference to the TEA and their new walkout guidelines.
They'll be investigating the extent to which a school could lose funding because a student was not present.
Nabil Ramadna, KXAN News.
That's the punishment. All these kids that are walking out because of this ICE protest, you know you're not going to lose funding, and you may sit there and say, well, it's my First Amendment right. Well, yes, it's your First Amendment right, but the schools could lose funding, and they could be shut down because all you want to do is hold up a sign saying, fuck ICE, all that stuff. You can't be doing that shit. And I heard about this. There was a photo I heard about this. One of my friends from Facebook posted a photo about this. This was on Chris 6 News. This was on Channel 6. And believe me, I don't have time to watch the news. I look at things. Take a look at this. This was shared. This was a lot of comments on this. And look at this. Take a look at this picture. Take a look. Take a look right here. Look at all these kids right here. All these kids outside the school are protesting. Now they did this probably after school, but my old high school friend, my old teacher said, this happened. We're trying to instruct a safety environment. And these kids don't care about what the governor says. They just want to go out and do their own thing. You got some rights, but you don't shed your rights in the schoolhouse gate. You have some rights. Look at Tankworth versus Des Moines. Look at the case there on the side of the students saying we don't have to say the Pledge of Allegiance or whatever. But they're siding with the students. And in some of these Supreme Court cases, the kids, sometimes the court's on the side of the school. For these kids, Alyssa Lamb, you got some dishes? Lay out 100 dishes. We got 40 kids that are suspended, and they gotta get some dishes done. Dirty up some dishes if you can. Gracie, dirty up the kitchen. Make them clean the kitchen as well. And now we're getting double. Lamb, get the dishes ready. We're getting double. I don't care if I get yelled at. It's like getting yelled at for buying stuff without permission. That's the way it is. Up next, a look into Governor Greg Abbott's comments all about protesting and losing funding. Still ahead, what drives somebody to kill? You may remember the case of Eric Smith. Why did he do it? He confesses. Now Deborah Roberts has the part of the story you probably never heard of, and later on, Megan's Law. Please stay with us. Welcome back. With all the students in every school district saying, we're going to protest against ICE, all the immigration, the governor decided to step in and do something about this. So if you knew what he did, you might have heard about the news conference that happened after these ICE protests. But if you've not heard the news conference yet, let's take a look. And you better take a listen to this, boys and girls, because this is going to be your school. And those 40 kids right there that are watching, y'all know who you are, because I'm pointing right at y'all. You better listen.
Schools are paid for by Texas taxpayer dollars. And those dollars go to schools for the singular purpose of educating those students. We have to do a better job in this state of making sure that our students know reading, writing, and math and science. You all have written stories about, and I agree that we have to improve test scores among our students. You're not improving test scores if you're skipping class and engaging in other activities. If you're a student, you have a job, and that's to go be in a classroom. If you're a teacher or educator, your job is to be educating those students in the classroom. And protests by leaving the school is not allowed by law. And so the schools get paid in part, receive money from the state in part, based upon average daily attendance. If kids are skipping class, going out protesting, those schools are not going to be paid for that day for those students who are skipping class. It's the responsibility of the superintendent, the principals, and the educators to make sure those children are in school getting the education they're supposed to be getting, and making sure that parents are reassured their children are not wandering around some street somewhere, but instead are where parents think they are, and that's in the classroom getting an education. Schools are heeding the expectations laid down by the Texas Education Agency, and they're saying, listen, no more protests during school. It's time to return to what their core responsibility is, and that's to educate our kids. The parameters will be set by both Mike Morath as well as other leaders at the TEA. But they will be looking for those who aided or abetted in violating state standards about making sure that children are in school, not leaving school. They'll be investigating the extent to which a school could lose funding because a student was not present for school for that entire day, as well as other activities. But it's basically getting back to make sure these students are going to be safe. And I got to add this also. I saw a video from another state, from Nebraska, that could have very well happened in Texas. One of these protests, a student was out in the street and got run over. And I'm telling you, if there's any student who gets run over because of a protest that was allowed by school to take place, I fully expect the school district and the leaders to be held legally responsible for that. One thing that I wouldn't expect them to really know, but I will use this as an opportunity to provide the education, and that is what I've heard repeated is they have freedom of speech to be able to go do this. And the reality, the law of free speech is more complex than that. You don't have freedom of speech to say and act any way you want to, anywhere you want to, anytime you want to. The Supreme Court has been very clear about free speech of students, and that free speech of students does not include leaving the school to go protest. And so, by Supreme Court precedent, what they did by leaving school to go protest is not protected speech.
Thank you for watching. Please hit the subscribe
It's
button
not
and get the latest
speech.
news.
Yeah, anyway, these kids are doing it nowadays, and I'm glad the governor had to speak out about this. You know? You have to understand where people are coming from these days. I mean, you know, you don't want kids being run over. I mean, everyone's always asking, what about the rights of a child? I mean, you gotta look at the Supreme Court case for free speech. You can't use Tinker versus Des Moines because the holes are going to be poked in that because the holes are going to be poked in the pockets. And then you got to look at other Supreme Court cases. So, what are the TEA guidelines? When we come back, we look at those TEA guidelines. Then we're also going to take another look into your student rights. And Deborah Roberts has a story about Eric Smith from back in 1994 and Dennis Murphy about Megan's Law. Stay with us. All these walkouts are happening because ICE is to blame. And now schools are going to be held accountable if nothing doesn't happen. Do you remember No Child Left Behind? If you remember No Child Left Behind, principals were held accountable because of how well their students did by taking a state test. But this is way different than taking a test on a piece of paper. No, this is a walkout. 4 days ago, the Texas Education Agency released these guidelines outlining the consequences of students, teachers, and school districts getting included but not limited. The Texas Education Agency today released guidance regarding student walkouts, absences, and actions related to political activism in response to Governor Greg Abbott's directive investigating instances of inappropriate political activism that will disrupting the learning environment in Texas public schools. These are the consequences. The first is students must be marked as absent and schools risk losing daily attendance funding if they allow or encourage students to walk out of class. So you teachers out there, you want to encourage your child to go out and protest because, over spilled milk? You're going to lose funding. Second, teachers that facilitate walkouts will be subject to investigation and sanction, including license revocation. Better not be doing that. Thirdly, school systems that facilitate walkouts will be subject to investigation and sanction, including either the appointment of a monitor, conservator, or board of managers. Today in classes across Texas, tomorrow's leaders are laying the foundational critical thinking skills and knowledge necessary for lifelong learning, serving as the bedrock for the future success of our state and nation. It is in this spirit that the school systems have been reminded of their duty and obligation to ensure their students are both safe and they attend school with consequences for students for unexcused absences. State law prohibits school systems from supporting or opposing any forms of political activism that disrupts learning during the school day, including facilitation of political activism through the use of taxpayer-funded district resources. If a school system is found to be in violation of state law, the agency will investigate and take appropriate action, which can include the appointment of a monitor or board of managers. It also prohibits certified educators from encouraging or facilitating student departures from class or school activity to engage in any form of political activism. Educators are also subject to all requirements of the Educator Code of Ethics and Local Employment Guidelines. If findings related to violations of law by certified educators are made, such findings will be referred to SBEC enforcement, which will pursue enforcement action with the State Board of Educators for certification to seek sanctions as warranted. Individuals with any concerns addressing their school's local grievance process should submit a complaint with the agency through the online complaints form. The agency throughout investigates even complaint received if violations of the law are found, the agency will take appropriate action to ensure the state law is upheld. I mean, let me close out of this real quick because we're going to take a look at the look at these policies. I mean, look at these responsibilities. This is a two-page summary. Under Texas Education Code Section 25.087. Look at this. 25.87. This is from the Education Code. A person required to attend school, including a person required to attend school under Section 25.085, may be excused temporary absence resulting and may cause for teacher, principal, superintendent. There's holidays, require court appearances, appearing at governmental office to complete paperwork, require connection to student application, taking part in the United States oath ceremony, election clerk, if students are I mean, this is all under that section, under Chapter 25. Under Chapter 25, these are now the requirements. And under Section 25.92, except provided by a section, a student in any grade of level kindergarten through grade 12 may not be given credit for the final grade for a class unless the student's attendance for at least 90%. So, you're going to be held accountable at some point. I mean, parents, you need to explain to these kids that, you don't want the school to lose money. So, I mean, if you want to go protest, that's on you. You've got to be understandable and say, hey, if you want to go protest after school. Don't do it while during school hours, otherwise you're going to end up in trouble and the school can lose funding. But the thing you gotta understand here is this. I'm not one of those hoodlums that are out doing this. Look at the prohibition in Section 28.02 of the Penal Code. The course to study. That certain strong requirements and provisions. For any course subject, including intermediate course for a grade level. This is all this in Section 28. This is all the requirements in this PDF document. In this PDF document, 2 pages worth, you can clearly look at this and say to yourself, this is what can happen when my child decides to go protest. Talk to your children. Tell them, if you want to go protest, go do it after school. Do not do it during school hours. I mean, you may sit there, you may defend yourself and say, well, we did it after school hours. Does it matter? Your principal was well aware of this. And I know this principal since she was my coach. And believe me, you may sit there and defend yourself while all 40 years sitting in the principal's office saying, well, we were just doing that to school because, this, that, and the third, All 40 of these kids are going to get suspended. And I totally agree. No, I don't think suspension should be good. You got to be in school. Let's just give all 40 of them detention. Put them in detention or in school suspension. Don't suspend them out of school. There needs to be time in school. Discipline needs to happen. You can't just say, I mean, back in the days, it's like, we're going to make you do janitorial work. Like, if you let classroom get food, they'll make you work in the cafeteria. If you got in trouble because you were hanging out outside of school, you would get detention. If you disrupted class, you would get lunch detention. If you were in Willis Point High. The thing you gotta understand here is this, all you kids out there that like to protest, dummies. You're dumbasses because you want to do it during school hours. It's going to get you into trouble. You should have read those guidelines and said to yourself, wait a minute, we should not be doing this. We gotta wait till after school. And your friends are like, nah, we won't get caught. We're going to. You're going to get caught and the school's going to lose funding. It's all in these guidelines. And all of these complaints, this is all from the TEA. You think this is being made up? The governor made a press conference about this, and the State Department and the TEA, which is the Texas Education Agency, they made these complaints. Look at all this. This was part of the conference. You know, state law says that schools should ban phones. And now the state says we're not going to, now the TA gets involved saying, hey, you know, we're going to not allow protesting. So you might be asking me, well, are you with the TEA or you're against TEA? I'm with the TEA on this matter. I side with the state. I side with the state, but I don't side with people who skip class to go protest. Isn't the freedom of speech like, it's an excuse? I mean, every excuse in the book is like this, you know. Oh, it's my First Amendment right to go protest. This is not Tinker versus Des Moines versus Des Moines. And if this was Tinker versus Des Moines, then this would be a different story. But this is not Tinker. The holes are going to be poked in that Tinker versus Des Moines by all the rights that are you probably heard of, and by all the court cases you've heard of. So you might be skeptical, confused about this. Like, what about all the other court cases that talk about this? Well, what I just talked to you about was the unpolitical speech that happened when they protested during school hours. When we come back, we're going to take another look into Hip Hugh's video talking about your rights as a student. You may be surprised by all the court cases that the holes are poked through the Tinker versus Des Moines. You got Tinker versus Des Moines, but there's other cases that side with the school. We'll be right back. So we're dealing with the protests that are happening in all these schools because of what the TEA and Governor Greg Abbott had to say about all these protests that are happening in different schools because of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And from Abbott's press conference, he made it very clear about the people that decided to protest, about the kids that decided to protest during school hours. And yet people are still confused about the child's rights in a school. So to help you guys understand, we're going to re-educate your brains. And this is something that all parents need to learn. So parents, sit your kid down on the sofa, grab some popcorn, get their milk duds, their soda, or some water. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this. I think this is something that maybe Alyssa Lamb could watch, can learn about. Because these cases right here from this video poke holes through the Tinker versus Des Moines. Put that in your pockets. But as Hip Hughes always said, the holes are going to be poked in the pockets. Take a look.
So we're going to start off with some good news. The actual first case that applies to students in a positive manner is 1943. This is West Virginia Board of Education versus Barnett, where a group, a Jehovah's Witness religious group, is basically complaining that they don't want to have to say the Pledge of Allegiance, they don't want to have to salute, and in the 1940s, you were compelled to do so or you could get suspended. And you could see sometimes the saluting was a little bit creepy. But either way, the Supreme Court's going to rule on the side of students who don't want to have to salute, say the Pledge of Allegiance, saying that the government doesn't have the ability to compel you to do that. So it's not so much a freedom of speech kind of idea, but more of kind of a freedom not to have to speak, not to have to act. But the big case, and this is the one you want to study, kiddies, is Tinker versus Des Moines, 1969. So here's the context of the case. It's 1965, the end of 1965, and the Vietnam War is getting a little bit hot even though it's the Cold War. And Robert Kennedy has basically announced that he wants a truce, a ceasefire, as we approach the Christmas holiday of 1965. And there's a lot of protesters and a lot of anti-war people and a lot of kids that are for this. And that includes the Tinker family. We have John, who is 15, Mary Beth, Paige, Hope, and a friend, Chris Heckard, that get together and they plan on supporting this endeavor by putting on some black armbands and going to the school. And when the Des Moines School District gets hold of this information, and it's not just the high school, but the middle school and the elementary school, they kind of, preempt it by saying, don't you dare. We don't want any of that kind of disturbance when we're trying to do the learning. And the kids do it anyway. And then on December 16th, Mary Beth and Chris Eckhard got suspended. John got suspended the next day. And it probably would have ended there if it wasn't for the lobby group, the civil rights organization, the American Civil Liberties Union, who came in and said, we think we should do something about this. And that case eventually travels to the Supreme Court. They had lost in the lower court of the district court. Court of Appeals was a tie. And now they're there to say that students have some rights. And the court agrees. It's the Warren Court, the liberal activist court, who basically says that it's one thing if you're trying to, promote learning, you're trying to have a calm atmosphere. You're not doing it for that reason. You're doing it because you want to avoid controversy. So students have a right, maybe not to yell in the cafeteria, but they have a right to symbolically protest, even if it's an unpopular opinion, in school. The court says you don't shed your rights at the schoolhouse gate. You got some rights. So enjoy that, because I'm about to poke holes all over your Tinker armband rights. So the first big hole in Tinker is going to be in 1986. It's an episode that occurs in the early 1980s. It's called Bethel School District versus Fraser. And Matthew Fraser is a senior, and he's nominating his friend Jeff to be on the student council. And he gets up there and he says, Jeff is a man who is firm. He is firm in his pants, firm in his character, and firm in his belief in our students. And he will use his point to pound away at this. The principal immediately suspends Matthew, saying that you've crossed the line. This isn't freedom of speech. And he's basically saying that's not for you to interpret. This is my freedom of speech. This is the Bill of Rights in action. And the court sides on the side of the school, basically saying that the school has an ability to limit Tinker if it comes to things that they can interpret as being sexual innuendos. And they say, obviously, the kid's referring to that, so we have the right to shut you down on that. And there are current cases. For instance, there's some students, middle school students, who are wearing the I Love Boobies bracelet in the kind of the cancer awareness fundraising spirit, and they were suspended, and they actually won their appeals case. It's not going to the Supreme Court. They said that that was a legitimate freedom of expression, and they're allowed to do that. But you better be careful if you're getting a little bit of, close to the hanky-panky, which is hashtag creepy. Another hole for you. This is Morris vs. Frederick, 2007. It was an incident that occurred in Anchorage, Alaska in 2002, where a young man by the name of Joseph Frederick wanted to play a little prank. And basically what occurred was there was a Olympic relay coming through town, so Deborah Moores, the principal of the school, released the students early. Joe wasn't there. He showed up a little bit late, but when he showed up across the street from the school, and as the cameras came out, their big moment was going to be on the TV screens. He unhurls the banner, his freedom of speech in action, bong hits for Jesus. I don't know what's going through the kid's head, but I know what's going through Deb Morris's head as she runs across the street and rips it out of his hands. And eventually, he's going to go to the Supreme Court saying, she violated my freedom of speech, she had no right to do that, and the school says, you better sit down, son. Number one, this was sort of a school-sanctioned event. You were supposed to be in school. The school had let out for that purpose. So whether you were there on your own or you're not, you're representing the school. And number two, it's not so much a freedom of speech issue when you're trying to advocate for drug use. And that's interpretable, but the principal gets to make that decision. So even though you're not in school, and even though you believe it's freedom of speech, the school has a right, because it's sending a message about drug use, to not let you put that banner up. So son, you can sit down again because you're suspended. So you want to print an article in the newspaper, don't you? You think you can do whatever you want because it's your freedom? I got news for you. That's going to be limited. This is another hole in Tinker. It's called Hazelwood versus Kallmeyer, 1988. And the students basically had written some articles that were first shown to the principal. And one of the articles was on divorce, another one was on teen pregnancy. They were interviewing students, keeping their names anonymous, but the principal was like, I don't think this is a good idea. You're not going to print that. They go all the way to the Supreme Court saying that, if we don't have this freedom of press right in school, how are we going to live it when we get out of school? And the court says, no, school is for learning, and schools have to have the ability to have what's called prior restraint, which means you're going to have maybe more limitations on your freedom of expression when it comes to press in school, because that's not really why you're there. You're there to create a learning environment, and if the school believes it's getting in the way of some kind of pedagogical purpose, then it has the ability to do that. So watch what you print in the newspaper, because you might be going down. Yo, you can't search me. You ain't got no warrant. Fourth Amendment, baby. Psych. Not in school, you don't. This is New Jersey versus TLO 1985. And basically these two girls, they're doing a little bit of a smoking in the bathroom. They come out, someone smells it. The vice principal's like, empty your bag. They're like, we're not going to empty my bag. The vice principal's like, I'm going to empty your bag. And bada boom, you have drug paraphernalia. You're out of here. And now she's going to the court saying he didn't have a right to search my bag. He had no probable cause. He didn't go for a warrant. He just on a whim decided he was going to do this. So it's an illegal search. Therefore, you can't use that in a court of law. Matt versus Ohio. Needless to say, the court says, sister, you better sit down because you're in big trouble. And what they come down to is basically saying the school has a safety purpose. They have to have the ability, if there's reasonable suspicion, to be able to search a student's purse. What if there's a gun in there? What if there's something dangerous in there? We can't have this kind of probable cause warrant court thing going on. You have an expectation of privacy, but not an expectation beyond a reasonable suspicion. Who's the reasonable suspicion decider? So I guess that would be, the person in authority. So why don't you empty your pockets? Be careful what you do, kids, because you don't get probable cause. You can't make me pee in a cup. Well, maybe we can. There's actually 2 court cases that deal with student drug testing. Both of them are random drug testing that occur when you join first an athletic group, and this was the earlier court case. This is Veronius School District versus Alton, 1995, where a student was joining a sports team and basically said, look, I didn't do anything wrong. You can't make me, give up my pee-pee because you just are randomly drug testing. You have to show I did something wrong. And the court says, not so fast, son. We have a duty in school, not only to send a message about saying no to drugs, but to make sure, especially in athletics, you can't be on the field high. You could get hurt. So we have a duty to protect not only the message, but to protect you. We want to protect you. So therefore, it was held constitutional that schools can do random drug testing when you're joining, let's say, the football team or the baseball team or whatever. Now, the next court case, which is a Board of Education versus Earls 2002, doesn't deal with athletic groups, but competitive non-athletic groups like the chess club or the debate club. And remember, the prior message was, we're doing it for your safety. You could get hurt out there. But the court's going to broaden that. They're going to broaden the hole in your kind of Bill of Rights shield by saying, nope, the message of drugs is so important. We have such a duty to protect that we have the right to do random drug testings if you join the chess club. So there you go, guys. That's all the court cases. You got Tinker versus Des Moines. Put that in your pocket. But be careful because there's holes in that pocket. So guys, we hope you learned something about your rights. You might not be that happy. Maybe you are, or I don't know, but it's important.
That's all the court cases you should know. If you know all the court cases, maybe then you know about your freedom of speech. If you put Tinker versus Des Moines in your pockets, you're going to realize that all the holes can be poked in your pocket. And if you take this view to the Supreme Court, they're going to side with the school because of what happens. I mean, we've all seen these Supreme Court cases, and this can really help you guys out. I mean, all kids have rights. Yes, they do, but you don't shed your rights at the schoolhouse gate. You still have rights, yes. But But that doesn't mean you go out and start protesting some things because it's an unpopular opinion, or because some customs enforcement shot somebody. It doesn't give you the right, because the state made some changes, and you gotta sit there, look at this, and go, well, wait a minute here. We shouldn't be doing this because the state made these changes. And your friend's saying to you, "Nah, we don't care about that." Just say to your friends, "I'm not going to be a part of it." And then walk away. Be careful who you're friends with. If your friend's telling you to jump off a bridge, would you do it? No. You may be asking me the same question. You may be asking me, well, if your friends told you to jump off a bridge, would you go do it? No. But if someone would have pointed a gun at my head and said, go jump off a bridge, I would just tell them to shoot, because it would have been a quicker death. They told me to be part of that protest, I would have said no. Ran, reported what happened, and then all 40 of those kids would have been asked to leave. They would have gotten arrested and charged with trespassing, depending on what happened. But after this, everybody, when this was on the news, people shared the crap out of it. A lot of people like saying, well, I'm proud of my child. And, all those kids that did this got what they deserved. They probably deserved attention, but we don't know the punishment because, nobody can release the information, disciplinary information. So, we'll keep looking into this story and let you know what happens. Up next, you heard about the case of Eric Smith 31 years ago. Now the question becomes, why did he do it years ago? He confesses. Now Deborah Roberts has some information that could unlock the secrets of Eric Smith. Stay with us. Well, 31 years ago, you might have heard the name Eric Smith. He was a teenager at the time, like 14, who killed a 4-year-old boy. And still then, everyone was asking the question, why did he do it? He says he did it. But was he to blame? The answer was no. But what else could be hiding in a child's mind when it comes to killing children? Here's Deborah Roberts.
Savona, New York, population 972. A quiet rural town nestled in the hills upstate. It's a great place, folks say, to raise your kids and forget the world's problems. 4-year-old Derek Roby's mom also used to think of Savona as a safe, sheltered town until one morning a year ago. She decided to let Derek walk by himself to a day camp just down at the end of this street. There's nothing unusual about that since everybody here knows everybody else. But Derek never made it. Later that day, police found his battered body in a wooded area just yards away from the camp. The only thing more shocking than the crime was the identity of the killer. A freckle-faced redhead named Eric Smith, who was 13 when he confessed to the killing just a few days after Derek's body was found.
Eric enticed him into a wooded area that's adjacent to McCoy Street, and once there, killed Derek Roby by means of choking him as well as trauma to his head and body.
Eric also admitted to sodomizing Derek with a stick and torturing him.
So he knelt down by Derek, right in the right part area where he had hit him with his rocks all these times. He said 3. Hit him in the head with some blood there. He took the Kool-Aid, and he did his hands like this. He said, so I took the Kool-Aid, and I poured it into those cuts. Those are his words. I poured it into the cuts. I said, what forever did you do that for? I don't know, I just did.
The horror of the crime was too much even for this veteran police officer. But some of Savona's residents who know Eric Smith were not as surprised. They say for years he's shown a pattern of bizarre behavior.
They were both sleeping in the living room. My son took the recliner and Eric took the couch. And evidently my son fell asleep, but Eric didn't, because my son said he had woke up with a burning feeling, something hot. And when he totally woke up, Eric had a lit cigarette laying on his nose. He burned his face with the cigarette.
When Eric was about 9, he used a clamp from a vacuum cleaner to slowly strangle the cat to death.
And what could cause such violent behavior in a child? The defense has an explanation.
Eric Smith suffers from a mental disease that can be characterized as a rage disorder.
In fact, defense lawyers say rage disorder consumed this innocent-looking teenager and led him to commit the most horrible act of all, the bludgeoning of little Derek Roby.
He builds up inside himself, from whatever sources produce anger, he builds up rage. And it doesn't express itself, and then the rage explodes.
Joe Pelch is one of Eric Smith's defense attorneys. Is he a murderer?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Is he capable of causing serious physical injury to someone as a result of his mental disease? Absolutely.
But he confessed to killing a 4-year-old boy.
He never said in his confession, I'm going to do this horrible thing, I intend on doing this horrible thing to this child.
But the child is dead.
Absolutely.
He was killed.
Absolutely. I believe that Eric has this mental disease, and that when he falls prey to the mental disease, that these things happen, and he cannot control what happens.
So Eric Smith's defense team is arguing insanity, saying the psychiatric term for his condition is intermittent explosive disorder. They brought in renowned psychiatrist Dr. Stephen Herman, who told the jury what Eric told him about killing Derek Roby.
He's smaller and practically helpless. I had to get my anger out on him. I wanted to hurt him.
Defense lawyers are also relying on the often used theme of a difficult home life.
Do you recall spanking with any implements?
My hand.
You ever use a belt or a paddle?
Probably once or twice, a belt.
Eric's father acknowledged that there were problems in the home.
A lot of people have noticed my aggressiveness and kind of shied away from me.
But what makes this case unique is another defense argument. One reason for Eric's violent behavior, say his lawyers, is something his mother did before Eric was even born.
For the record, Tammy Smith.
While pregnant, Tammy Smith took powerful medication to prevent epileptic seizures.
Did you stop taking Tridione any time during your pregnancy with Eric?
No. Tridione, also called trimethadione, was determined to be dangerous for pregnant women as far back as 1971 and has carried this strong warning label since 1980, the year Eric was born.
It is by far and away the most toxic drug for a pregnant woman to be on.
Neurologist Dr. Oren Davinsky, a specialist in treating epilepsy, says most doctors today prescribe drugs with less damaging side effects. He says the vast majority of children whose mothers took trimethadione during pregnancy developed serious problems.
It can cause major congenital malformations. There are a variety of minor anomalies, which are things like low-set ears, widely spaced eyes, which are more minor and cosmetic. And then there are neurologic problems like mental retardation, learning disorders that can range in severity, but are also relatively common.
And Eric, still in the 5th grade at 14 years old, has all those problems, according to Dr. Herman.
Commonly in this syndrome, the ears are malformed and folded over towards the front.
And over time, he testified, those physical problems and the taunts they brought on from other children contributed to Eric Smith's uncontrollable rage.
What we're saying is that he was developmentally delayed academically, walking, talking, things of that nature. His eyesight's bad. And that led to a low self-esteem, a feeling of no self-worth, and that coupled with the other kids in school picking on him because he looked funny contributed to the mental disease that he is now suffering from.
But you know, a lot of people will hear your defense and roll their eyes and say, here we go again, another excuse defense.
We are not looking for an excuse as to why Eric did this horrible thing. We are looking for the truth.
And this is not an okay person, but that's a far cry from the legal conclusion that he's not responsible.
Prosecutor John Tunney dismisses the trimethadione defense, calling it a reach.
It may well account for his funny ears. Beyond that, it says little or nothing.
Eric Smith never testified on his own behalf. The question is, will the jury believe that this teenage killer was himself a victim of problems out of his control? Yesterday, they heard closing arguments.
Clearly, the elements that have been proven here are Eric Smith suffers from a very serious mental disease, such that he ought to be confined in a psychiatric institution. Eric Smith's emotions are not extreme. We're talking about anger, disappointment, maybe some jealousy. I mean, that's garden variety stuff. It's the raw material of virtually every adolescent's life. The emotions were not extreme at all. It was his conduct that was extreme.
Just half an hour ago, the jury ended their deliberations. The verdict was unanimous.
Yes.
So you find the defendant guilty of murder in the second degree?
Yes.
Eric Smith now faces a minimum of 5 years to a maximum of life in prison. The defense says it will appeal. Meanwhile, the residents of Savona are left to wonder if anything could ever explain how such a tragedy could have happened here.
Once again, we should emphasize, for the nearly 1 million women in this country of childbearing age who use epilepsy medications other than trimethadione, there's hardly any chance the drugs you're taking will affect your baby.
Okay. How can we prevent this from happening again? Well, we need to take certain steps to make sure this doesn't happen to every other parent. And it may be to where you're taking medication. If you're taking medication, you shouldn't be taking any medication. If you do, stop taking medication when you're pregnant. While you're pregnant. Don't do drugs, don't drink, don't smoke while you're pregnant, don't do drugs while you're pregnant, don't drink while you're pregnant. It's common sense, bitch. Stop taking medication, stop drinking. Can't do that. Can't be doing that. It's going to get you in trouble. You're going to lose the baby. If it's something you want in all your life, stop taking the drugs. Stop taking it. Otherwise, it'd be like that Maury Povich commercial, you know, the parody DNA test with the home voice. Yeah, bitch, I told you wasn't mine. I'm going off topic here, but either way, here's common sense. Drugs and pregnancy don't mix, like autism, drugs, and alcohol don't mix as well. It doesn't combine very well. Take it from me personally, who is on the spectrum. I don't drink, I don't smoke. Autism and drugs don't mix. Pregnancy and drugs and alcohol don't mix either. You mix those two, you mix those up, you're down for disaster. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Come up next week, we're going to be talking about how alcohol and jobs don't mix. If you're drunk, you shouldn't be on TV. You're going to meet this one person here who was a news anchor, but the dark secret is he wasn't drunk. And now for the first time, he tells his story. And a surprising look at what happened, plus some Project Baltimore. That's coming up next week. That's all for this year's Game Break Friday. I'll see you again next week. Follow us here on YouTube. Good night. And concentration, not strain. Stop bullying, speak up. No jaywalking.